Well, good morning, everybody. It is Thursday morning here at the Well Church Overflow Podcast, episode 40. 40.
The big 40.
What's
We
up?
made it.
We have Matt Brunner next to me. Pastor Matt was our teacher this previous Sunday here. It was December, I was going to say, but it feels like December.
Not quite there yet.
No, yeah. It was October the 12th.
Yeah.
And Pastor Matt Brunner was teaching us this previous Sunday. And the title was Promise Requires Perspective, as we are continuing our fall sermon series of either problem or promise.
That's right. And so we jumped into Genesis 37 through 45. So, a very small passage there.
Sure.
But yeah, the life of Joseph. And so all the ups and downs that he faces and how he had to have a right perspective of the promise through that whole thing.
Yeah, absolutely. So thank you, by the way, for giving us an extensive review, as well as you gave us the whole soap opera, you did mention the soap opera thing, and so did Jeff in the previous weekend, Pastor Jeff Waterman. So we're continuing that soap opera-esque feel, these episodes basically of what's going on with biblical history. And in this particular story, we're looking deep into the life of Joseph and his brothers and Jacob as well. What's going on and all the problems that they put Joseph through, all the problems that Joseph had to live through, but he maintained the right perspective through it.
That's right. And a lot of family drama there, but the circumstances that Joseph faced, like almost none of them were things that he caused. A lot of times when we enter bad circumstances, it's usually because of something we did. Mm-hmm. But in his case, most of the time it was someone else was doing something to him. And yet, as you were just mentioning, maintaining the right perspective, he was able to keep God at the forefront, make his priorities right, and live by the principles that God wanted him to live by.
Yeah. Thinking about how he disclosed his dreams to his brothers, he might have had a slight hand in causing some of these things.
Yeah, he surely didn't help things by doing that.
Right. By the way, you're all going to bow down to me. Mm-hmm. I'm going to be the best and the leader of everything. But
he was 17. I mean, how many bad decisions did you make as an?
Too many.
I know. Yeah. And especially with siblings,
Right.
And for him being one of the youngest brothers, he got a little bit of an ego there, but.
Yeah, exactly. So I really do like how you started off your sermon this past Sunday. You gave us a story, and it was about a Chinese farmer. Mm-hmm. And the Chinese farmer had multiple things happening throughout his life. Do you want to share that with somebody who wasn't here this past Sunday, or maybe just a listener who is not even a part of our church?
Yeah, so the basic gist is that there's this old Chinese farmer, and one day his horse runs away, and so the villagers come and they say, well, that's so unfortunate. He says, well, maybe. But then later the horse comes back and it brings several wild horses with it. And they say, wow, that is so fortunate that that your horse came back and it brought these other horses for you. And he says, maybe. And then his son is training one of the horses, falls off the horse and breaks his leg. And so the villagers say, wow, so unfortunate. And he says, maybe. And then at the end of the story, the government is coming around to conscript young men into the military for the war that their country is facing. And but they pass over that old man's house because the young son has a broken leg and is of no use to the army. And so, wow, so fortunate. He says, maybe. So again, maintaining that perspective that your circumstances don't dictate how you respond to them. They don't dictate what your attitude or what your view of your life is. It can change at any moment. And so being able to persevere and continue on the right path is important.
That's very good. Exactly. So, yeah, you did close that story on Sunday with a bit of a quote, and it was saying the crux of basically what the entirety of your message on Sunday was that circumstances will change. Things are going to happen to you in this temporal life that we all have here on this planet. So circumstances will change, but will you be able to maintain
the right perspective?
The right perspective, exactly. And so where do we find what that right perspective is? I'm going to throw a larger question at you.
Well, for sure. And that's why we have scripture. That's why we have to be able to develop those abilities to study God's word and to glean from scripture what his directives are, what his commandments are. In the New Testament, Jesus talks about this. you will show your love for me by obeying what I command you. And so we show our love for God by obeying his commands, no matter the circumstances. You also acquire that through learning from biblical teaching, from connections with other Christians, from the Holy Spirit as you pray and discern. And so all of those things give you the directives, but then it's incumbent on you to actually follow through with them, and that's obviously is the hard part.
Yeah. So the perspective is on, okay, what is God doing in my life through this thing? How has he been preparing me for this particular circumstance that has come about? And a good way to do that is also to kind of think about your past. Like, what's led me to this point? What skill sets has God been developing in my life, or what people has God brought into my life? And then how would I rightly utilize those either gifts or people or skill sets, whatever they might be, to really just have the right response in this particular area? That's a bit broad, but we're going to dive into that a little bit. So those circumstances might be you're mistreated, mistreatment in life, or another one that you brought on Sunday was temptation. There's a temptation that has approached you, or another one is transgression of others transgression. So like you were saying, Joseph may or may not have actually brought these things onto himself, but others transgressed, and now he has to maintain the right perspective in then responding to those things. So yeah, circumstances will happen, and then we have a response. That response needs to be with the right perspective and biblical.
For sure. And that's the thing too, is I think, there are times where we feel like everything's just out to get me, or everything's against me. And so you can feel overwhelmed, and you can feel, as I said, a sense of despair, or that you might feel like giving up, like no effort is worthwhile. And you can see that in Joseph's life. You could have seen him giving up at any moment, where he was sold into slavery. He could have given up right then. But then he rises the ranks as a slave in Potiphar's house, and then he's falsely accused. He's thrown in prison. Like, how much worse could it get? So he could have given up then, but he still remains faithful to God. He still puts God as the priority of his life, even in prison, unjustly in prison. And then even after he has an opportunity to get out, he has this cupbearer who is going to be restored to Pharaoh's household. And he says, hey, can you tell Pharaoh that I'm here through no fault of my own? And the cupbearer says, yeah, I'll do that. And conveniently forgets for 2 whole years. And so you can imagine being Joseph in prison. It's already been 13 years of him being in slavery and then in prison. We don't know how long for each one, but he's been 2 whole years of having someone who was already with him, who was restored to being with Pharaoh, who said he was going to share with Pharaoh that, hey, this guy Joseph, he needs to go free. And yet nothing happens. And yet Joseph, every step of the way, lives by principle, not by what he thinks will get him what he wants out of life.
Yeah, wow, that must have... I mean, it really is unimaginable. We can't really put ourselves in that situation, or how difficult those times must have been, especially with the conditions of the prisons of those days and so on and so forth.
Now for us, like mild inconveniences are like, big deals to us. We get in such... tie ourselves in knots over little things that compared to what Joseph went through was nothing. So.
Yeah, that's true. So I'm reminded of the 3 V's that we have a chance to respond with, which is either this response of being a victor over a situation, or a victim of a situation, or the villain in response to a situation. So let's kind of dive into that a little bit too, though. So Joseph was faced with mistreatment multiple times, and he actually chose, as part of your blanks within the notes this past Sunday, was diligence over despair. Instead of despairing, he actually chose to be diligent with the things that he was charged to be in charge of.
Yeah, so he chose to be faithful in his work and actually put good quality effort into it. He gave it his best, despite the fact that he was in a new place. He could have felt like, well, I have no obligation to serve this foreigner and to serve someone of the land of Egypt. But yet he was faithful and diligent as a slave, And it says that God blessed him,
Yeah.
that he made everything that Joseph put his hands to succeed. But in order to have the Lord make those things succeed, he had to first put his hands to them.
Yeah.
And so I think that's important for us to remember as we face the mistreatment, as we might have things that happen to us. We can take the victim mentality and say, oh, well, woe is me. This stuff is happening to me. Well, I'm just going to give up on it or do the bare minimum. Joseph chose the victor route where he said, no, I'm going to put my best foot forward, even though I'm in a situation that is not ideal. And God made his efforts succeed.
Yeah, I love that. The quote, the verse is, "The Lord was with him and caused all he did to succeed." That's really nice, and it's great for us too in this day and age. I like to take what we learn on Sunday and then make it practical and apply it to, okay, how can we actually live and learn from these things too? And so yeah, God is blessing his diligence, and the same is said Jesus with his parable of the Minas.
The parable of the talents, essentially.
Yes, exactly.
Different versions and different gospels.
Yeah, so whoever is faithful with little will be entrusted with much. And this is it's leading us into the next point, which is integrity, and living with integrity, doing the right thing when no one is watching. And so Joseph was tempted, and he was tempted while people were around him, but then he was also tempted when people weren't around him. And like you kind of hinted at on Sunday, probably a good chance that Potiphar's wife had planned the day out where, okay, everybody else, you got stuff to do. I'm going to try to get my time alone with Joseph here. But man, he didn't want to sin against either his master or against God.
Exactly. And that's the thing that one thing I mentioned on Sunday is that temptation isn't a one and done thing. Resisting temptation isn't something that's going to be a one-time event that, okay, I resisted that temptation, check that box off, I'm good. It's a recurring event. It says day after day, Potiphar's wife would speak to him, would try to get him to sleep with her. And so day after day, he had to continually refuse. And the thing about temptation is no matter what it is, whether it's greed or lust or fear or gossip or whatever it may be, the temptation compounds on itself. So the more you resist, the tougher it is to resist. And so it's more and more difficult. And then, like you said, he has an opportunity where it's just her and him, and she tempts him again. She reaches out to him, and he flees the scene. He would rather run away, just physically get out of the situation, than have to try to endure that temptation or give in to the temptation. And that's the thing too, going back to diligence and despair as well. Diligence is a daily decision as well. He could have been diligent for a week or a month or a year and then given up after that. But it's a daily decision to put your best foot forward, to follow God's principles, no matter what comes your way.
Yeah, he really displayed an honest and upright character, which is something, again, that God blesses, a wholeness in characters. And he probably acted quite different than the cultural norms or standards of that day, which means that there's holiness there. He's set apart. He's something different or unique. And this is God's Spirit working through Joseph to live this way. And the same thing is available for us in today's day and age as well. God's Spirit is with us, and we actually have perhaps even a greater allowance of that Spirit working within us since the death and resurrection of Jesus. Now we can do the same thing, if not more, right?
Exactly. And so, and in Joseph's case as well, going back to the indulgence idea, other people could have looked at Joseph and said, well, you say you don't want to sin against your God. Well, what has your God done for you other than let your brothers take you, pretend like you were killed and then sell you into slavery. And then this woman keeps enticing you. And now you're alone. Like, why not? Why not just once give into it? Who's going to know? Who's going to care? God will forgive you. But no, Joseph chooses integrity. The Spirit is working in him to maintain his integrity in that situation and in all situations, because ultimately, even though God's grace does abound, Paul says that we should by no means go on sinning so that grace may abound. He said that the idea is, the goal is holiness, right? Be holy as God is holy. So he will forgive when we do slip and when we do sin, but the idea is to maintain your integrity, not to give in and then ask for forgiveness later.
Yeah, and God really does require us, expect us, command us to forgive others, so we then will be forgiven ourselves, you
For
know?
sure.
And so Joseph actually has that choice too, by the way. He can either have go for revenge or a vengeance kind of mentality. That's the villain, by the way. I'm going to get you back for what you've done to me. He has multiple chances to do that. And he does kind of play in those areas just slightly with the silver cup that was stolen, so to speak. You know, he kind of had his play too. But he really does land towards forgiveness and especially reconciliation. Do you want to talk a little bit about the reconciliation?
For sure. And that's kind of the interesting thing about Joseph's story is like the interaction between him and his brothers when they come to Egypt when the famine hits. And so Joseph is now second in command of Egypt. They've been through 7 years of plenty, and now a severe famine has gone throughout the whole world. So everyone is coming to Egypt to buy food because of Joseph's handling of it. But the brothers come, and Joseph recognizes them, but they don't recognize him because it's been, at this point, 20 years since they've seen Joseph. So they have no idea what has happened to him. And then one moment that I did not mention on Sunday that I think is very interesting is that Joseph is testing them. He's saying, no, you're spies. You're not really here to buy food. You're here to spy out the land. And the brothers are trying to defend themselves. But as they're doing so, Reuben is talking to his brothers, and he says, this is happening to us because of what we did to our brother Joseph. And they don't realize that Joseph can understand them because they're using an interpreter between them and him because he speaks Egyptian now. But he understands their language because he grew up with it. And so he actually is touched by that they are still remorseful for what they have done, that 20 years later, it's not like they've kind of swept it under the rug. Like this is still in their minds. And so there's a change happening. And I think that's part of what the whole testing process was with the silver cup and keeping Simeon back and all that kind of stuff, is to kind of test the waters to see where the brothers were at with what they had done. And then ultimately when Judah comes the second time and says that, we can't return to my father without Benjamin, the youngest, because if we do, our father will die of sorrow, of a broken heart. And I've promised that if I don't bring him back, that it's my fault, that I would be to blame for that. And this is a kind of a reversal or I don't know, what would you call it? Making up for what Judah did when he was the one who came up with the idea to sell Joseph as a slave. And so Joseph at that moment finally breaks down and says, I am your brother. I am Joseph. I'm alive. Is my father still alive? And the brothers are stunned, right? They see, oh no, like the brother that we hated so much that we were willing to, like, we were thinking about killing him, but we just sold him into slavery so we could make some money off of it. Now he is second in command of Egypt, and he's in control of our fates now. We were in control of his fate. Now he's in control of our fate. What is he going to do to us? So they were worried about that, but Joseph reassures them. He says, am I in the place of God?
Right there,
Am I the one who is supposed to dole out justice? No, that's God's place to do that. I am going, and he even says, God sent me here, that he used what you did to send me ahead of you so that you could survive. So I will deal kindly with you. I will deal well with you and your families. So bring our father here, settle in this land, and dwell with me. And they are just overwhelmed with the response. That's not at all what they were expecting.
Yeah, talk about a perspective shift as well, because God has made a promise to Abraham and to Jacob and so on. Your seed is going to grow, and they're going to dwell in a nation where they're going to be in bondage. It's going to be for 400 years. And that hasn't happened yet, but it will. And it's because of this right here. It's like God is just able to mix and manipulate and make time happen in such a way and have these events transpire in such a way where, wow, his prophecies just come to pass, and they don't know why or the outcome of what's happening here. And certainly Joseph's brothers did not expect to need Joseph in order to save all of their people, which at that time when they came over to Egypt, by the way, was 70 persons. That's kind of a large family, and from 70 people, of course, then develops the entire Israelite nation of maybe a couple million people. It is just wild to see how God manages those things and manipulates time.
Exactly, and his promises come to fruition, and ultimately that's what Joseph's life is about. Is that God gave him this promise through the two dreams that he had at the beginning when he was 17 years old, that he would be ruler over his family. But the brothers were trying to eliminate him. They were trying to get rid of that promise, as it were, and try to keep that from happening. And yet God worked through it. So even though bad things kept happening to Joseph, God was preparing him for the promise ultimately, which ended up happening over 20 years later. Well, I guess 13 years later was when he became second in command of Egypt. But then his brothers didn't come until 20 years later, and that's the whole reminder for us, is that God is faithful to fulfill His promises. So we should be faithful to obey Him, even if it seems like His promises aren't coming the way we thought they should. And God prepared Joseph. What I love about each of the stages is that he rises to second in command in each of those situations. And even when he was younger, you could kind of say he was second in command because Jacob trusted him more than the other brothers. He was like, hey, you go check on your brothers and give me a report. Yeah. You have this beautiful cloak to show that you're essentially my favorite, right? So he was kind of rising to the ranks of second in command no matter what it was, because God was preparing him to be second in command of Egypt.
Wow, that's excellent right there. Let's wrap up this episode 40, with kind of just this collection right now. So basically, throughout the whole process of Joseph being mistreated, Joseph being tempted, Joseph facing transgressors, God was preparing and growing Joseph for the promise that he ultimately had, as well as the purposes that God had developed him into that person to become. And through which God saved and Joseph saved many lives throughout the famine. And again, God is never asking us to seek revenge or vengeance through dealing with these circumstances, but rather, as you said, to have that faithful and right perspective. Okay, God, what are you doing now? Let me be prayerful. Let me ask you about this. Let me read into your word. How does your character or your will, how could it fit into this? And so then we can kind of throw it back onto each of us here and say, like, what are you going through? And what has perspired and developed throughout your lives? How can you look at those things and say, okay, what or how was God preparing me or developing me? And then how could I then be utilized by God throughout that situation, wherever you are right now?
Exactly. And I think you had mentioned this earlier in the podcast. I don't know if you did or not, but how Jesus talks about those who are faithful with little will be entrusted with much. So you might be thinking, oh, what's God's purpose for my life? What direction and calling does He have for the big calling of my life? And that's something that I think God will reveal over time. But the question is, for your daily life, your daily walk, what are the little things that God is calling you to be faithful in right now? How can you be faithful in those little things? And God will bring about His promises for the much that's coming. So Joseph, he was faithful in the little things when he was under Potiphar. He was faithful in the little things when he was in prison. And so by the time he gets to his position as second in command of Egypt, he is able to manage all of that because he has been faithful in all those little things. And so the big thing doesn't seem so big because it's just a conglomeration of all those little things.
Wow. I like that perspective right there. The little things. That kind of brings to my mind Jesus' constant command of be not anxious for the things of tomorrow. Don't worry about this thing for later. Today has enough worries for itself. Just worry about the little things today. I'll take care of the rest. I'll bring this story to completion. I got you, right? And we have assurance of this as well through His promises that we can then rely on. So that would then give us boldness, I would say, producing within us a boldness to I want to say like integral living, but like living with integrity is what I really want to say there. It gives us boldness to evangelize. It gives us boldness to act in a Christ-like way, knowing that, okay, God's got my back. He's going to work all this thing out for good, regardless of what other people may desire for it to be. Which leads us, of course, into next Sunday, where I'll be giving the messages coming Sunday, and it's through Exodus 3 and 4, if you guys want to get a little extra reading in there. And the title is Promise Produces Boldness. So that would be then the follow-up response to, well, dealing with the promises that God has given us and the promises that he has already, I guess, bestowed upon us. Hey, I'm going to be with you to the ends of all age. So we should have a certain boldness about us.
That's awesome. I'm really excited to hear this Sunday what you have to say and what God has put on your heart. And like you said, it's something that's important for us to remember, but it's easier said than done. So I think what you'll follow up with will help us apply that to our lives, help us to remember, you know what? Yeah, it's not about me making things happen. It's about me being faithful with boldness so that, and then God will make the results come, that's awesome. I'm excited to see what happens on Sunday.
Thank you very much. I'm interested as well. It's going to be good. So folks, thank you so much for tuning in and listening to yet another Overflow podcast. Once again, this was episode 40. 40. I can't believe it. And we'll be seeing you guys this coming Sunday. It'll be October the 18th. Yes, not December, but October the 18th. And life will be good. We'll see you there at 10 o'clock in the morning here at the Well Church in Brighton, Michigan. Thanks again to Pastor Matt Brunner for chatting with us today.
No problem. It was my pleasure.
Yeah, take care, guys.